Which month is White History Month? No, well, come on, tell me.
Well, I'm Jewish.
Okay, which month is Jewish History Month?
There isn't one.
Oh, why not?
Yeah.
Do you want one?
No.
I don't either. I don't want a Black History Month. Black history is American history.
How are we going to get rid of racism?
Stop talking about it. I'm going to stop calling you a white man.
Yep.
And I'm going to ask you to stop calling me a black man.
Racial tensions in America. American reparations. Ian Trottier here for Discussions of Truth. Yeah, it's interesting. A recent conversation. I was watching Pulp Fiction, and the references to the English word that resembles the Latin word for black, which is negro or negra. Tarantino in that film makes multiple references of the use of that word. And ironically, this is what's quite interesting. In that film, the character played by Samuel L. Jackson, named Jules, is on the phone to his boss, and he says, "Look, I need some help cleaning out the car." He's at Tarantino's house, as it turns out in the film, and again, in that dialogue used not only in a similar moment by Tarantino himself, but also by Jackson, who happens to be a black man, African-American, if you will, whatever you choose to use. He also uses that word. It's become ridiculous in America that society is so fragile in regards to the use of a free-flowing tongue or free speech. People have become so incredibly sensitive and easily offended. It's completely against the founding principles of the country. But of course, that brings into the fact that I'm going to address slavery today in American reparations. Now, ironically, in Pulp Fiction, even though Tarantino uses the word, quote, nigger, he uses it. And I know many people that use the word. I was called a cracker the other day. It didn't really bother me. And I certainly don't use the word in a derogatory sense. I have plenty of friends that are of African descendancy. Makes no difference to me. A human being is either a good person or a bad person. But the irony here is that Tarantino uses the word, and it's his wife that comes home from her late shift in that scene of being a nurse at a hospital, and she happens to be a black woman, African American. Okay, so American Reparations, this is live now at iantrottier.com. The article contains excerpts taken from my book, No More Lies. You can buy that now, Books A Million. Go to iantrottier.com, click on the link in the top of the header that says 2023 American Reparations. America's quest today to balance societal norms and cultural inequalities calls for qualifying descendants of the transatlantic African slave trade to be reimbursed by government for financial losses incurred due to decades of racist policies and discrimination. I frankly don't understand, personally, racism and discrimination. That's just the way that I've always lived my life. It's not something that I've ever incorporated into my societal dealings. People are equal. That's just the way that I was raised. And however, I do contest that the slave trade, this is my argument in the article, and I'm simply going to read verbatim the article for you to make it in, therefore, an auditory format. I contest that the slave trade itself was not American practice and was a forced reflective element of the debt-based banking system. Washington's, that's George Washington's, D.C.-based government of 1776 was coerced to accommodate. Yes, all 13 colonies at that time practiced slavery. It was Pennsylvania that was the first to begin the abolishment of slavery. But yes, at the time in 1776, that government based in D.C. that I just spoke of, now it may have been Philadelphia, it was certainly Philadelphia at that time, went from Philadelphia to New York and then returned to D.C., but it's the same government that is controlled by this European banking system. So I continue. Again, this government was coerced to accommodate to the economic system to pay for its supposed independence. It never received financial independence, folks. Therefore, echoing the very dangers of Hamilton's European central banking system that many at time were opposed to, and that included Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr. Slavery was never an element of true American cultural fabric and was a forced economic operative by the European banks that held monopoly over America's economic freedom. A monopoly being the only president, there's now 46, the only president that has left office without a national federal debt was one. No, for you Trump people out there, it wasn't Trump. It certainly wasn't Obama. It wasn't either the Bushes, and it wasn't John F. Kennedy. Nor was it Abraham Lincoln. The only president in the history of this country to leave office, I believe the year is 1843, that's Andrew Jackson. He's the only one. He's the only one out of 46 that left the country without a debt. And he specifically ran on the re-election platform to, quote, kill the banks. That's basically how he was reelected, because he knew of this European tyranny way back then. One such leading organization today fighting reparations, seeking reparations, as set out to equalize repercussions of said societal disparities, is one Eric McDonald. I just sent the article to him. See if he responds. He's of the San Francisco-based African American Reparations Advisory Committee that I believe as of either this morning or yesterday want to give qualifying individuals in San Francisco $5 million. Gavin Newsom, is your state in a major debt itself? They want to give $5 million to qualifying personnel. Qualifying personnel that have likely, I suspect, unless they've been part of some type of a sex slavery, have no idea what it means to be a slave in terms of the supposed ancestors that may have been performing work on plantations. So anyway, as much as mainstream media would seem to impress upon viewers that racism today in America is perhaps at its worst levels, which I find preposterous, rewriting history since a few years shows that one such leading American of African descent asked for mainstream media voices, i.e. Mike Wallace, to cease impressing such national communal dichotomy. Let's replay this.
Which month is White History Month? No, well, come on, tell me.
Well, I'm Jewish.
Okay, which month is Jewish History Month?
There isn't one.
Oh, why not?
No.
Do you want one?
No.
I don't either. I don't want a Black History Month. Black history is American history.
How are we going to get rid of racism?
Stop talking about it. I'm going to stop calling you a white man.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you to stop calling me a black man.
So Morgan Freeman is basically saying there, in my opinion, is that, hey, why slap a label on me if you don't agree with it? Clearly, Morgan Freeman is incredibly articulate, very intelligent. He's a Hollywood star, celebrity. The man is very wise from the outset. I've never sat down with him, never spoken to him, but he seems like an incredibly intelligent individual. And equally, you could say the same about Mike Wallace, right? So the question to me would be, hey, Mike, am I a black guy if I'm Morgan Freeman? Do you see me as black or do you see me as an American? And do you see me any different than you? I mean, there's certain questions that could be asked during that interview that Morgan could have been directing toward Wallace's. Why is Wallace doing the segment on Black History Month and bringing in Morgan Freeman for his opinion? I don't know. I don't know the two of them. And again, I haven't spoken with them and sat down with them. But clearly, Morgan Freeman sees himself as an American, nothing more. And it'd be no different than someone of Chinese ancestry in California that may have been brought over Angel Island to help build the railroads in the West. Okay? No difference at all. It doesn't matter what the person or individual looks like. We have to follow the money here and look at the money. And that may not necessarily mean that you, because you're linked to ancestors that worked illegally on plantations or in a enslaved manner, that doesn't mean that you should be receiving taxpayer money because your ancestors had to fight discrimination. Okay, that's my opinion. Let's continue. So this is a June 14th, 2006, 60 Minutes interview. Again, Mike Wallace and Morgan Freeman. I suspect Morgan Freeman he clearly doesn't want to be called a black man, right? I mean, he's not stated that, but that would be the consensus, I would suspect. And he probably doesn't want to be identified as an African American. The man's born America. It seems to me that the man wants to be called an American. Okay? And Morgan's not saying one way or the other. He's not putting a label on himself. However, Mike is clearly saying, well, I'm a Jew. Well, that's his right. He wants to identify as a Jew in a face-to-face conversation, an interview with Morgan. That's Mike's opinion and right. That's his. I mean, it's not. It's a fact. I suppose it's a fact. He is a Jew. He's a Jewish man. But it's his choice to say, "Hey, Morgan, I'm Jewish." You didn't have to give Freeman that information. Made no difference. What they were talking about is being an American. Period. Being an American and being identified as an American, not a Mexican, not a Canadian, an American, and that's what makes this country great. Okay, so I concur with Freeman's remarks. Inasmuch as I can trace nowhere in my trottier, French and French-Canadian history, or Hamilton, which is my middle name, direct from Scotland, lineage to ever having owned slaves. It's not found in my family lineage, not that I've been able to find. So I can't identify with that. I myself work my rear off, day in, day out. I work very, very hard. I'm in my 6th year doing the podcast. I've been working on my website. It was deplatformed from a previous server. It's still doing strong with the current server. But I do this to educate and do my part to keep America a great country. By the way that I see it, great. Constitutionally enforced. However, a $30 trillion plus federal debt means that I see all Americans, regardless of ancestry and racial makeup, as slaves to what I see and to my research shows is an unconstitutional central banking system. One of my best friends from childhood is a black man of African ancestry. We speak every so often. He happens to live in California. The main reason I'm a political activist, podcast host, and author is due to my gay Jewish friend. And you can find that in some of my other writings. That's just the way it is. David was a gay man and a Jewish man, and he was my best friend. I have a number of Black, Asian, and Latino friends of current. I don't discriminate. I choose my friends based off of the human value that they bring to me, my day, and my life. And usually those values are identified as joy, laughter, acceptance. Some of the basic values that any human being looks for, love. I don't see differences that the mainstream media, and this is me personally speaking, seem to generate profit off of by creating viewer animosity, i.e. Fox News, CNN. all the mainstream media outlets, they're creating this divide. It's very apparent. As a child typically embraces these types of differences openly and doesn't give them much thought. If you're a parent, you probably see how your child interacts with other children at school. I would suspect that's, again, based off of my view of the world, that most children don't see these differences created by media. It's generally the corrupt education system and large corporation media outlets that impress these differences upon us Americans. And why? To generate profit and viewer discord. Division creates attention. It generates viewership, generates money. So where does the slave system come from? Where does it derive from? Because it's not American. Slavery is not an economic invention of America. It just isn't. Where does the slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade that we speak of, that men such as Eric McDonald and these other folks that are fighting reparations, where does that slave trading system that corroded the values of America come from? Where did it come from in 1776? Where did it root from? It didn't root from England either. And that's the language which we all speak, which I'm speaking right now. And if you go to my website, that you'll be reading. It's not English. It's not an English invention either. Let's take a look at a revolution. War makes money. Revolution creates war. Division creates revolution. Monopoly of economy creates centralization. And I've got a great article on my website that breaks the Federal Reserve down and that unconstitutionality of it. Recent years, we saw such grassroots societal machines of turmoil and turbulence in a way Americans never saw before. And many of them responded to groups such as Antifa and BLM and those very aggressive, physically aggressive social movements. Completely different from the peaceful movements created by the followers of the Martin Luther King Jr. era. Such organized machines of turmoil and disturbance can do and did create what is known as a color revolution. Recently, a very good friend of mine, and she was the first guest on the podcast back in 2017 in Wynwood Radio, Miriam Henning, did a in-depth reporting, it's in form of a documentary, on the George Floyd death, murder. And she says that incited a color revolution. It was a purpose psyop. Great documentary. I highly recommend it. And you can get to that by simply typing in the real timeline, Miriam Henning, George Floyd, something like that along those keywords into your search engine. But here's an interesting quote that's worth sharing. The color revolution oftentimes distracts followers from those that engage from the root of the problem. And I argue that the root of the problem is the economic monopoly that strangles America today. And it's not racism. I don't think Americans are racist by nature. I simply do not. I don't agree with that. Do I think that some people do sow elements of discord in society? Of course they do. Of course they do. On all types of different levels and grounds. You see somebody in a store and you judge them just based on their appearance or the way they speak. That's just the fact of the matter. But do I personally think racism is a problem in America? No, I don't. I think the federal debt and the way that the international bankers use America's military is the most pressing problem. And I also think that this censorship element The fact that Americans are afraid now to voice their opinion. I think vaccine mandates, things of that nature, and an American's level of feeling scared to voice their opposition to a mandate. I think that's also a problem, a major problem. Quote, since Aristotle's time, the world has been shaken by thousands of rebellions. One political analyst, Harry Eckstein, counted 1,200 violent attempts to shatter old social and political structures between 1946 and 1959. With so many examples to study, scholars today can tell us more about revolutions than Aristotle ever did. 1964, one such scholar, Chalmers Johnson, grouped all revolutions into 6 different categories. The 6 included 1, Jacqueries 2, millenarian rebellions 3, anarchistic rebellions 4, Jacobin communist revolutions 5, coup d'etat, and 6, militarized mass insurrections. Reading about them will help you understand why revolutions happen, why some succeed and why most fail. That was written by Jonathan Rose in 1987, May 4th. You can find that at Gale.com. So as the George Soros-funded machines of discord continue to fuel disparity within America's borders today, let's take a look at the economic monopoly I speak of and trace it back to where the transatlantic African slave trade began. And here's a surprise. It far predates George Washington and 1776 America. Adopted from England, the U.S. economy and therefore law is all based off of that, of Rome. That is fact. So where did this economic concept of slavery come from? Something called a Roman papal bull. And I'll get into that in a moment. But let's start with the Vatican. And you can go right now to booksamillion.com. You can buy my book, No More Lies. I highly recommend it. Again, excerpts of what I'm going to be sharing here with you are found in, I believe it's chapter 3 of that book. The Vatican is a sovereign nation unto itself. It is its own country. For over 2 millennia, it has controlled, operated, and ruled exclusively off of that means Rome's interpretation of God, and not yours. And that's a fact. That interpretation, known as church, is administered, or religion, implemented and distributed around the world on a daily basis. In that regard, it is the world's largest business. Has America been a pawn to mindless irrational wars, to simply participate in someone else's very profitable holy war? Have they been simply a slave to the global economic system that they depended on? That is America. Or has America been the clear aggressor and purposely imposed its will globally to broaden its war chest and expand its empire? I think not. But think about what I've asked here for a moment as you consider the great melting pot of cultures, languages, ethnicities, and histories America has fostered. All central banks, economically, feed into Basel, Switzerland, and the Bank of International Settlements. That is my understanding. Prove me wrong if I am wrong. America, that includes the Federal Reserve. And therefore, yes, America, you are not so independent as you may think, because you don't have your economic independence. You're subservient to this larger globalized economic machine that's based in Switzerland. I feel safe in stating that nowhere else can be found in one book the connected presentation of the story leading up to the death of Abraham Lincoln, which was instigated by the Black Pope, the general of the Jesuit order, camouflaged by the White Pope Pius the Sixth, aided, abetted, and financed by other divine writers of Europe, and finally consummated by the Roman hierarchy and their paid agents in this country and French Canada on Good Friday night, April 14th, 1865 at Ford's Theater, Washington, D.C. The suppressed truth about the assassination of Abraham Lincoln by Burke McCarthy in 1973, originally published in 1924. What I just read you is an excerpt, a quote excerpt taken from the book The Divine Providence by James McBride and Ed Reichen, written in 2013. And James is a former guest of the program, Discussions of Truth. So folks, as you listen to me, pause and take a breath. The human lifespan is short. Reflect on your current age. Are you 25? Are you 40? Are you 76? Are you 16? How old are you? And how long does the average human being live? We're talking about Abraham Lincoln. We're talking about over 150 years, right? 150 years, what's it been, 150 years? Over 150 years. That's, if you're 50, that's 3 of your lifetimes. So what's the average human being live? 80 years? I don't know. Discovering what governing body has been elite at conquering lands and destroying nations from within over many centuries may result in the theological answer, which couples with theory, and therefore the term that arose after, my understanding, JFK's death to combat the narrative given by the Alan Dulles report on how he was assassinated. The term frequently used today to immediately shudder and knock down an opposing argument, a conspiracy theory. But isn't religion based off of theological theory? And what I contest here in this article is that Rome, for instance, has been conquering lands using other people's militaries for centuries in the name of religion. It's an ingenious concept, ladies and gentlemen. It's brilliant. It's brilliance. And if you are a Jew, for instance, as my friend David was and as Mike Wallace is, I suspect that if my words resonate, you would be doing everything you can to preserve the U.S. Constitution and work against any element of America that opposes it. All right, let's kind of get back to slavery, but we're going to get into symbolism here briefly, all right? So the cross. The cross is the universal symbol of Christianity. It is seen on the British Union flag. You see three crosses on the Union Jack. You will see that also it has been built into the grounds of the Vatican Empire. Is that St. Peter's Square? The cross appears on the Swiss flag, additionally, the first flag of the United States. Probably something you didn't know. The flag flown by John Paul Jones on the Delaware had the Union Jack in it. Crosses. Crosses appear on the Australian flag, the English, Irish, and Scottish flags. And again, going back to the Union Jack, that's the cross of St. Andrew, St. Patrick, and missing one, but it's the three St. George. Those three crosses appear on the Union Jack. Crosses also appear on the U.S. Confederate flag. Right? So during that Civil War over economics, and yes, definitely the very gross element of those current economics, which was using slave labor to profit, the cross also appears on the Confederate flag. You probably vision that in your mind. You probably don't even realize. That that's a cross you're looking at. That is the cross of St. Andrew, Scotland. That's what you're looking at when you look at the U.S. Confederate flag. Crosses are also seen on the flag of Greece, Denmark, Dominican Republic, the state of Florida, Sweden, Finland, Jamaica, and many more. Many others. The impression I make upon you is that you consider it to be a Roman symbol of conquest, Christianity. Conquering in the name of religion, holy war. If not geographically, then economically, of course. Just because a country does not bear a cross on its insignia or ensign means not that its government or banking system be not economically conquered by this Roman central banking system. It all depends on what elements of the banking dynasty out of the Vatican that has financed the conquest. So I'll give you a different perspective. The Spanish conquistadores conquered most parts of the Americas or New World. They did so in the name of religion. That's a fact. Historically, I see not a single African country doing this. The Kenyans, Nigerians, they've never built ships to sail around the world to conquer lands in the name of their religion. I mean, on the outset, the African people, what you may call an African American today or a black person, I mean, historically, these are probably the nicest people on the planet. So nice that they were taken advantage of and thrown into slavery. Now, it just so happens that genetic makeup excels greatly in an organized athletic atmosphere. I mean, look about entertainment. Look at Ben Carson, who ran for president. Okay, I mean, the DNA obviously flourishes, but I haven't seen any of those countries of that slave origin build ships to conquer lands and slaughter people. It's not who they are. Again, I assess that the people that are referred to as African Americans are probably the nicest Americans. So, given that, let them have reparations. But, again, I don't see that as being a justified means of balancing societal equality. I don't. But, again, I'm arguing for the fact that these people have, well, I mean, we can go off in a lot of different tangents here, and I'm not going to. I'm going to kind of come back. But yes, we know that they built the American financial security. We know that. The cotton plantations, the tobacco plantations, and this has nothing to do with me. I'm just looking at history from an outside perspective. But let me give another example. Here's a tribe, an organized tribe in Africa of particular interest. These would be notified or characterized as black people, okay? They have fought over their lifespan of an organized tribe, years and years and years and years, decades, centuries, against European colonization. They're known as the Balanta. And Sifaway, who runs that, he's a Yale grad, is a former guest on my show. When you go to iantrottier.com and you click on the article that I'm reading from and referencing here, you'll find it. Balanta, the Balanta Society. Click on it. Listen to that interview. See what they are doing. And as a matter of fact, Sifaway and the Balanta have fought severely against the vaccine mandates and the integration of that technology into the coming onslaught of a centralized U.S. currency that feeds into this greater globalized central digital currency. So conquest and colonization was also done on varying levels by the French, Portuguese, Italian, Dutch. Yes, the English. And yes, of course, this is where we get the language that I'm speaking, you're listening to today. It doesn't make the English bad. It just makes it important to understand where the English came from. And again, that's what I'm saying. You probably heard the term all roads lead to Rome. Most of the efforts were done in the name of and for these conquering efforts, religion. Again, going back to Rome, the religion and still is an active religion and or construed as, you can see it as a business, is seated in Rome, in the Vatican, which in and of itself is a sovereign entity, a nation in and of itself. It's protected, incredibly well protected and secured and guarded. Nonetheless, I contend that this religion or theology that lived before us and will outlive all of us is in modern day, as of 1960s, referred to as liberation theology. Okay, in and of itself is not, but a tactic of these measures to conquer is, of course, liberation theology. It's the same tactic of liberation theology that can be applied to creating this racial turmoil in America today. Social concern for the poor and political liberation for the oppressed. Like looking in a mirror. This spring comes from the fountain of the Second Vatican Council after World War II. The same organization that forced Native Americans to accept its religion or face death, i.e. the Aztecs, Mayan. That's what I mean by American, the continental Americans. It's wolf in sheep's clothing. Sounds a bit like a tactic to create socialism. The term referred to theology within the overall Catholic theology, but it is also may depict the underlying tone of the religion. So let's get into papal bulls, because papal bulls is probably what you do not know are the legal basis. And then we're getting into theology. What is legal and what's not of slave trade. In 1481, the papal bull known as Aeterni Regis, delivered by Pope Sixtus IV, set the stage for the voyage of Christopher Columbus in 1492 and the discovery of the West Indies. Think for a moment of the British East Indies Company, 1600. Okay, it's why the natives on America are called Indians, East, West, considered to be controlled primarily by the Rothschild, a known money manager of the Vatican. That's beside the current point, but let me remind you that the sun never set on the British Empire. So enter now the papal bull issued by Pope Alexander VI on May 4th of 1493, called Inter Caetera. This bull granted the Catholic monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella, all lands west and south, and it gave way for the declaration of Treaty of Tordesillas that officially granted various New World lands to Spain and Portugal, respectively. Basically, it takes the map, the globe, flatten it as a map. Maybe the Earth is flat. I don't know. That's a whole other argument. But you take the globe, flatten it, map, and you divide it. Give half to Spain, half to Portugal. That's how that happened. That's Inter Caetera. Among other works well-pleasing to the divine majesty and cherished of our heart, this assuredly ranks highest, that in our times especially the Catholic faith and the Christian religion be exalted and be everywhere increased and spread, that the health of souls be cared for, and that barbarous nations be overthrown and brought to the faith itself. You should appoint to the aforesaid mainlands and islands worthy, God-fearing, learned, skilled, and experienced men, in order to instruct the aforesaid inhabitants and residents in the Catholic faith and train them in good morals. Quote from said Papa Bull, Inter Caetera. From my understanding, a certain Papa Bull promulgated on September 27th, 1540, made much of the work of the Society of Jesus, Black Pope, possible. That is also known as the Regimini Militantis Ecclesiae. Now, if I'm mispronouncing these Latin Papa Bulls, do please forgive. It would seem that in one form or another, this remains an active military order within the Vatican. The Society of Jesus, IHS, in hoc signo, which is the abbreviation for it, by this sign, something Constantine used, was founded by the militant Ignatius of Loyola at the University of Paris, September 27th, 1540. Founder of Georgetown University, which sits next to Washington, D.C. It's a theater to D.C. politicians. John Carroll, the first bishop and archbishop of the United States, joined the Society of Jesus at age 18. The Jesuits, as they are called, are considered to be a militant order, nonviolent, of the Roman Catholic Church. How do you have a nonviolent militant order? I recently gave a presentation on my book, and that was one of the questions I got from someone in the crowd. How can it be a militant order? I don't know any Jesuits to be militant. Because, as I've alluded to earlier, the brilliance is using other people's money, using other people's military to achieve your objective, a la Bush's in Iraq, a la Afghanistan, Obama in Afghanistan, right? Using other people's military to achieve your objective. Mindless wars that were not American wars. These were not American wars, folks. Vietnam, no different. The Society of Jesus are known as God's Marines. These are fighters. These are soldiers. And as stated on Jesuit.org, part of their goal is, quote, to educate ministries, seek to nurture men and women for others. Nurturing men and women for others, I'll interpret that as shaping someone in the name of God or their beliefs into someone they may not necessarily want to be. Brainwashing. A bit like mandating a N95 mask to help protect your neighbor that is mandated to stand 6 feet away from you in the grocery store line. You're helping the other person, right? When it's not even a lethal virus. Nothing, can't harm you anything more than a common cold, typically, right? If you have a decent immune system. And after having put the carrots back in the produce section that you bought with the fingers of the hand they wiped their nose with, it's all for the good of your neighbor. Right? It's all for the good of the neighbor. Or maybe, folks, it's all for the good of taking cash out of society to brainwash you to accepting the safety of a digital currency. Of interesting note, consider a religiously based militant order theoretically infiltrating or politically attacking a country's societal structure from within. A stealth army. Whereas this may be the case of these societal norms that have been implemented and passed down generationally through the cultures that have sprang out of the areas that have made up what we know as Washington, D.C. From landholding a farm southeast of what is now known as Georgetown stems the nickname often given to D.C., referred to as Rome on the Potomac. Whereas, as I write this, the first black woman has been nominated for the U.S. Supreme Court, and that's an excerpt from the book. That is a wonderful thing, however. Ketanji Brown Jackson, a native of Miami, Florida, under oath, states that she does not quite remember the basis for the Dred Scott decision of 1857. Reparations? I don't know if she's actively seeking them or not. But you want reparations, you don't know your history. I'm not saying that I do, but that's an eye-opener. And in a highly charged racial environment, which we supposedly live in today, which I disagree with, strives to bring equality to all, this would certainly be a good thing for someone to understand, regardless of gender, ethnicity. Jackson has also stated that she is unaware that Georgetown Day School, a D.C. religious-based private school where she serves on the board of trustees, at least she did when she was appointed to the Supreme Court, is openly teaching critical race theory, CRT. This academic theory is indeed being taught at this institution on a very wide scale. That's known. For a school that has produced the likes of men such as Thurgood Marshall Jr., this would certainly be a good thing to know for a woman who sits on its board of trustees. A little bit of ironicity, right? Ironicity here. Given the history of the Inquisition, when was the last time the Vatican produced a black pope? Take that into consideration. And I mean, since America is so racially fueled, how about the Vatican, for instance? A female pope, African pope? Those are just a couple of thoughts here. Remember, your enemy works to divide and conquer you. And this particular one, I argue, has been doing it for centuries in the name of God. Okay, so regarding America's first black president, let's just get into that, because I want to get into a little bit of opinion here. You need to know my opinion. If you've gotten this far in the podcast, you're going to hear some more of my opinions. Did Barry Obama, I think you grew up by using the name Barry, did he ever provide an authentic birth certificate, folks? Well, you may say, well, it doesn't really matter. He's a great diplomatic, professional man, very intelligent. Doesn't really matter where he was born. Okay, that's one way of looking at it. If it doesn't matter where he was born, then none of what I've told you and the research that I've done here and presented your way, none of that matters, right? So, therefore, if we didn't have a birth certificate properly provided by a man that sat in the White House for 8 years, are we really led to believe that the 2020 election of Joe Biden was the most level and balanced and just election ever? Likely it was rigged. And you can source a book called Vote Scam by the Collier brothers. They trace his mainstream media in cahoots with big tech, having rigged presidential elections back to LBJ. That's their work, not mine. I've spoken to countless black people that don't even see Obama as representing blackness. Okay? And this is what we do know. Obama doesn't really identify with slave trade, right? I mean, maybe it's on his father's side, I don't know. But likely not, if the father was born in Africa, which is what we're told. The only African identity that he has is through his father, because we know that his mother's white. And here I'm saying that I've spoken to black people. They're clearly dark-skinned black people. And they're saying, we don't even think Obama's black. So why is it that if you have a small percentage of your ancestry, take the guy Mahomes, take Steph Curry. I mean, Steph Curry, isn't his mother French, kind of Creole? I mean, she's a very light-skinned woman, yet she's black. Right? Steph Curry, very light-skinned person, but he's black. Patrick Mahomes, same thing. His mother's a blonde hair, probably blue-eyed. I mean, his mother is a very white woman, yet he's black. Right? I mean, maybe we can use other examples, but it's like, why not just go back to Morgan Freeman? Because Morgan Freeman is clearly a black man with a very strong percentage of African DNA in him. Why don't you just go back to him? Why don't we go back to what he's saying is all Americans are Americans. Who cares about the color of skin tone? Right? Who cares about their skin tone? I certainly don't care about mine. Had I been born different, I suspect that I may have a different view. I don't know. I haven't been born. I am who I am. But I know that I struggle and work my ass off to get through life. And I'm just giving you my point of view. You can either agree with it or not. But I'm bringing up these historical elements to support that. Okay? And here's another way of looking at it. Had I been born black, the likelihood that I would have had this excelled level of athleticism or ability to entertain on whatever scale would have been even greater. So likely, had I been born a black person, I would have been living a much more fluent life and prosperous life in today's America than the way I am and have been born. Okay? So there's a really good example to consider. Regarding America's first black president, those are my opinions, okay? And frankly, I coincide with some of these other opinions. I don't see him as a black person. I don't. Colin Powell, I suppose you could see as being a black person. I don't know. But again, get past the kind of labeling. We're Americans. And we don't even know if Barack Obama is truly an American. He never provided that birth certificate. How do we know he's really an American? And my thoughts are, well, they do align with the Collier brothers in that he was placed there by this European puppetry, banking puppetry. Now, regarding Dred Scott, the Virginian board Dred Scott, Chief Roger Tenay wrote the opinion in his case that people of African descendancy are not included and were not intended to be included under the word citizens in the Constitution, and can therefore claim none of the rights and privileges which that instrument provides for and secures to citizens of the United States. This, of course, is widely considered the most alarming, worst, and distinguished decision to come of that court, Dred Scott decision. Human beings of all ethnicities, backgrounds, and skin hues are and should be treated equally. So this is what Kajani Jackson, right, didn't understand. She didn't know what the Dred Scott decision was, and I just told you. The Roman bulls considered when looking at racially based slavery that came to the United States via the New World are these: 1452, Dum Diversus, Papal Authority to Enslave, quote, Sassarans, pagans, and unbelievers. 1454, Romanus Pontifex, granting African slave trading monopoly to the Portuguese crown. 1493, Inter Caetera Terra, which I've already mentioned, gave rights to global conquest to Spain and Portugal, dividing the globe in half. Transatlantic slave trade has its root in the early years following 1441 as a then European African enterprise. It was then that under Henry the Navigator, the Portuguese seem to have first arrived in Africa on the journey of discovery. In this time period, with explorer Nuno Tristão, Portuguese trader, arrived to Bay of Arguin in the Cape in Cape Blanc, West Africa. So it were during these first voyages that they met the, quote, Negroes for the first time. With this bull of 1452, they received from their highest authority, the Holy See, the permission to enslave these people. As history shows, and certainly if you are of African slavery descent, this repulsive and inhumane practice, roots to Dum Diversus, became commonplace at the expansion of Western civilization. What I'm saying here is this. The distinguishment and the differences between human beings of European versus African origin in this time period, 1450s, was all manipulated under the holy perception coming out of God's delivery through the Roman mouth. So the argument here is that seeing differences in society and human beings is a religious, theological, fueled division to elevate and put one's theological and theocratical belief system above someone else's, and therefore dominating it and conquering it economically, which is what has happened in the United States. Seeing your neighbor in a different way is un-American. Seeing your neighbor as someone who may need your help to bake bread, to help drive to the store, to cut the lawn, that is an American virtue and value. That's America. Seeing your neighbor and saying, I'm better than you because I believe in this God and or I am born this way is un-American. This is European, and precisely this is historically Roman. That's my argument. Now, of course, prior to the creation of Rome, there were differences, but this is the great Greek, getting back to Aristotle, this is the great Greek kind of struggle to create a level democratic, this is Greek, democratic, playing field and living environment. Okay. And in my next book, that's exactly what I'm going to be getting into, is how and why Rome has continued to squash these beautiful Greek theologies that have helped Western civilization flourish in education. Okay, Rome is still an enemy in that sense, based off of their religion. And I'm not saying that everyone in Rome is bad. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that the Pope is bad. I'm not saying that the institution itself is bad. I'm not saying that people that follow its precepts are bad. But I am saying that it is used to elevate its belief system above others. And yes, America has fallen victim to it. That's exactly what I'm saying. The values of America today are not those of, well, the strong values that control it economically are not those of the Protestant Mayflower. Georgetown Day School is an independent co-ed institution. Brown Jackson has 2 degrees from Harvard. And John Harvard was a Protestant. Deliberate dumbing down. See Charlotte Iserbyt, one of the early guests on my program. And her father was a member of Yale's Skull and Bones. Okay, so liberation theology, let's get into a little bit of the roots of socialism, the Paraguayan reduction system. Again, economics. You're seeking reparations, that's up to you. Okay, because you feel that your ancestors were improperly treated. That's your opinion, that's up to you. I discourage it. I don't think it's just. I don't think it's fair for other people. I don't. But that's up to you. Just as me writing this article and speaking my mind is up to me. So gold, glory, and God, the 3 Gs. This was the widely considered motto of the exploration, expansion, and conquest mentality that these European countries conducted their global power bidding under and for the Vatican from 1400 to 1750. Similar to the missions of California, Baja, the basis of the development of the Paraguayan reduction systems missions was done under the direction of the Jesuit order 1683 through 1834. Of note here is that Baja California missions under Spanish expanded initially primarily under the framework of the Jesuit order until the Jesuits, were expelled from Spain by Carlos III of 1768. This was somewhat different in California Alta, as it was primarily Franciscan order under the lead of Friar Fer Junipero Serra, OFM, Order of Friars Minor, that those missions were developed. The first mission along that route in California in the Pacific Ocean, known as El Camino Real, was established in San Diego, July 16, 1769. And last, being San Francisco Solanas, July 4th, 1823. San Gabriel Arcangel, Los Angeles, has been established 1771, September 8th. And San Francisco de Asís, that we know as San Francisco, where this fellow Eric resides, I assume, had been established October 9th, 1776. Yes, that's the same year as the Declaration of Independence. Again, under the Franciscan order, and speaking of gold, the first gold discovery in California was 1842 by Francisco Lopez Mayordomo of Mission San Gabriel Arcangel, Los Angeles, the 6th year prior to James Marshall's discovery along the American River in Northern California, Sacramento, Oak of the Golden Dream. You can find that at parks.ca.gov. A century and a half earlier, on the other side of the world, 1609, Hernando Arias, governor of Asunción, Paraguay, and Bishop Reginaldo Lizarraga, initiated Jesuit missions to be developed for the natives of the region of South America, Paraguay, Argentina, and Brazil. Under the direction of his Jesuit provincial Diego de Torres, the Jesuit who had been in Peru in 1581, began the chain of Jesuit missions. The argument here is that the Jesuit order had a far different governing model than other orders, referred to as socialist theocracy and benign colonialism. I'll get to that in a moment. But of note, It is my understanding that the following distinction can be made between the three missionary orders I address here. Franciscans, 1209, and typically known to be simple and peaceful order, focusing on the work of the poor. The Dominicans. All right, so let me give a quick timeline, just something to consider here, right? So we're looking at elements. Why does America exist? Where did it come from? Basically, is the approach. Okay, I mean it's not. You've got it now. But what are the kind of the cliche sayings? Freedom isn't free, right? Freedom isn't free. Freedom isn't free. Yeah, you listen to me, and regardless of where you stand on, let's say, vaccine mandates. I mean, at the base and principle, whether you believe or believed in the COVID-19 threat, and again, I'm coming from a place of having lived through the Zika virus in Miami and the pesticide that was used. So whether or let's say this, whether you have the decision to go down to your McDonald's with, let's just say hypothetically, the knowledge that eating X amount of McDonald's in one's lifetime can lead to cancer. Okay, let's just take that as a consideration. Yet you want to go eat McDonald's hamburgers and fries. Well, should your government, your local or state, should your government mandate you against the ability to choose to eat a McDonald's hamburger and fries? I mean, that's what's the difference between a virus that causes cold and flu-like symptoms and can cause death if you have a weak immune system? Okay, let's just surmise that and say, well, you know what? I'm gonna eat honey. I'm gonna eat garlic. I'm gonna protect my immune system. I'm gonna build my immune system up. I don't want your vaccine. I don't want your synthetic concoction inside of my body. Right? So freedom is not free. And if people don't express their opinions against certain elements of governance or big box retailer or corporation or whatever it may be, science, health, whatever it may be, then the encroachment, the centralization of that power gets greater. Yeah, it's like the Costco's, Walmart's remaining open during the lockdowns. The local middle class mom and pop shops, boom, ran out of business. Yet the big boxers remain open. So let's approach things from a historical perspective. Again, where did America come from? Where is it going depends on you. But where did it come from? Well, 1492, Columbus discovered Hispaniola, Dominican Republic, New World. 1507, the first mapping of America was created by German Martin Waldersmuller, cartographer, named for Italian Amerigo Vespucci, an explorer. 1513, Florida was discovered by Ponce de Leon. 1517, Mexico discovered by Hernan de Cordoba. It lands in the Yucatan. 1518, Veracruz, the other portion of Mexico, or New Spain, discovered by Hernan de Cortez. 1525, the first transatlantic slave ships arrived from Sao Tome, Africa, to Hispaniola, Santo Domingo. 1528, Venezuela discovered. German colonies established as Little Venice, Klein Venedig. 1528, Peru was discovered, the Inca coastline. 1537, the Asuncion, Paraguay, founded. 1619, first slave ships arrived to America. That is the United States, what became the United States, Virginia. That ship was known as White Lion. 1620, Mayflower lands Plymouth Rock. And 1776, American Declaration of Independence was written. And, of course, here we are in 2023. Let's pay attention to two of those dates, 1525 and 1619. You look at those two dates, those are active slave dates, which means slavery was not a U.S. phenomena. Slavery was a continental phenomenon. America as a country, how it was far from formed in 1619 and certainly 1525. Yet the European colonists were trading these slaves, again, under the direction of the Papal Bull, folks. The Spanish and Portuguese were trading these human beings from Africa with permission directed from Rome. The practice clearly adopted by the English sea merchants. It delivered the first African American slaves to Virginia in 1619. Note, the same time in England, the Mayflower was leaving the British Isle for a reason of religious liberty. Rome. What is the connection? Alex Trebek. So look at that timeline again. What are some of the main constants over the centuries? English, Spanish, Portuguese, man's fight for freedom, various levels and facets of what is defined as freedom or conceived or perceived as freedom. Not only slave and economic freedom, but again, perhaps the most important, religious freedom. So nothing has really changed in 2023. What predates all of the civilizations is Rome, and the global economic system Rome, has imposed throughout its existence, more than 2,000 years, under the name of its largest business or financial generator, religion. Economic roots of socialism. So allow me to broaden with a more historical scope again. The reductions of the South American region initiated in Paraguay aimed to geographically isolate and convert the natives to Christianity and its culture. Reduce the impact by conforming them to the European model. Now approach it from an angle of land acquisition and conquest. It was the main goal to gather these people, control them, put them on reservations and encampments, weaken their forces to make them subservient and ultimately undefendable. It's exactly what big box government is doing to America today. Make Americans undefendable. Destroy the military, take the guns away. Again, could religion be used as a means to simply exploit natural resource and obtain geographic control? Yes, absolutely. And as was the case throughout all of America. Whether it had been Portuguese America, French America, English America, Spanish America, or Dutch America. And I make the argument because I'm a free thinker, as you are, or should be if you're not. Rome has encapsulated more successfully within the past 2,000 years AD than any other culture of man in the history of mankind, far dating to 10,000 years prior to Rome's existence. The depiction, mathematics, terrestrial governance, and understanding of something called astrotheology, ladies and gentlemen, theological interpretation of astronomy, is how they've done it. And that religion, defining God, and that taking nothing away from anyone's belief in what God is for you, and that is up to you. And that is the, again, in my belief, my view, the cornerstone of the greatness and beauty of the United States Constitution. From 1609 to 1767, the Jesuits governed socialist theocracy in Paraguay. Never more than 2,000 Jesuits managed a Guarani Indian population of up to 150,000 people, a network of over 35 reductions, a mission dispersed over an area twice the size of France, and encapsulated in the Spanish-Portuguese colonial system in spite of external political adversity, war, and epidemics. The Jesuit state in Paraguay reached extraordinary levels of economic welfare, surpassing standards of living even of many European areas at the time. Walter Noneman, University of Antwerp, 2009. The point here is that these reductions were and are a great example of the productivity of a designed, implemented, established, and functioning socialist community. Of course, the retort to that is that the Jesuits established a form of governance that exploited and confined these people based solely and principally off their religion, or as above referred to as socialist theocracy or benign colonialism, a very productive method of control, government, simply depending on who you are, what your interest may be, and which side you may align yourself. Therefore, Christ, in said format and belief system, be the spiritual depository upon which man places all of his divine passion or emotion. The governing body, state, or reduction in this case, or earthly representation of God, i.e. Pope, then becomes the administrator of all of this human liberty and godly bonding, and therefore created out of man's desire to control. Roman Empire. In the name of God, communism becomes the intimate form of human conquest. Let's be frank here, ladies and gentlemen. If you're reading this and you are of African ancestry and your family or heritage struggles do represent that of slavery in America, how many generations can you trace your origins back? Likely not many. Before the trade boat crossed the Atlantic. My point is this: the real families, organizational structure you should be seeking reparations from don't reside in America. Here's an opinion of mine. You should be more concerned about living freely in a society that separates church and state and frees its chains from this Roman establishment than you should in trying to sink America further into its current slave condition. Federal Reserve. Because, if anything, you've read here that I've written so far makes sense to you, you'll see that America itself is a slave to this Roman central banking system, folks, which makes you and me both slaves, modern slaves. Political power struggles, 3 popes. Here's a quote. That is the gray pope, the white pope, and the black pope. And I'm not going to get into that here. I'm going to try to wrap this recording up, but you can find that in my article. And I get into it again in my book, No More Lies, which you can order right now at booksamillion.com, iantrottier.com. There's a link there. There's another mystery. This is written in 2015 by a guy named Gianluigi Nuzzi. There are bank accounts in the name of popes who died many, many, many years ago. When I discovered these, I asked around in my information resources in the Vatican, but it's still a mystery. Bank accounts of dead popes. So I get into the Orsini family, I get into the Medici family. These are old families. What I was saying was, if you're an African American, how many generations can you trace your family history back? Okay, probably not more than the boat that it came on, right? I mean, let's just be frank here. My lineage, Trottier, I can trace back to 1646 and a couple generations in France prior to that. But that's about as much as I personally can trace back. It's like 19, 20 generations. In contrast, if you look at some of these wealthy European monarchs and these Roman nobilities, Orsini, Aldobrandini, Medici, these families trace their roots hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, back to like 1,200 years. And there's obviously people out there that claim that they can trace their roots back to biblical characters. I don't know. I don't know. That's, again, I try to keep religion out of the my argument and my podcasting and my writing. Obviously, you have to bring it in because, like I mentioned, astrotheology, religion is based off of the functioning mechanics of the universe and how Earth, moves in that. But in regards to what people believe is a pre-life or afterlife or the meaning of life, I don't get into that. I just do not get into that. I kind of look at facts. I look at religions that have been here. I look at Rome. I look at families that have controlled Rome. I look at inequalities in society. And I look at what is the beauty of government in regards to the creation of the United States and the Constitution, which I fully support. But the country's become incredibly corrupt, which, again, I argue is this European banking system. It's not a model. It is the system that controls the model. So, these families have controlled popes. Here's a quote. by a guy named Eric John Phillips, former guest on my show. He's written a book called Vatican Assassins. On page 805, he says, the Jesuit general, the Black Pope, controls both the CIA and the KGB through the American and Russian branches of the Knights of Malta. Now, some of these things are not theory, folks. These are not conspiracy theory. They are indeed fact conspiracy. Brigadier General Robert Spalding, former guest on my show, he says America's been invaded by a stealth enemy. We have a president just allowed a spy balloon, a spy craft. It's an aircraft, fly over 2,000 miles, basically across the country, and he did nothing about it. And then what was it? Just yesterday, 2 days ago, some of these high-level personnel was it North or South Dakota, one of the Dakotas, at the nuclear arsenal, relieved of duty. The military itself, folks, has spies in it. I mean, this country is in problem. You got problems. And you can't let some of these little things bring and keep you down. Let your voice be heard. You speak out against Twitter censoring you or taking down your tweet, or Facebook doing the same. Speak up and out against that. Freedom is not free, ladies and gentlemen. And if it's taken from you, it's very difficult to retain and get back, I suspect. That's my suspicion. So in closing, I leave you with this paragraph. My main point is that historically, one organization, more than any other known to modern man, would have the organizational, the resources, the sophistication, the economic power to infiltrate and destroy any country. And with that organization that comes out of the theological foundation that has produced global economy today, would it be rooted to Rome? Argument is that yes, indeed, it is known as the Vatican. That is my consideration. I'm asking you to consider it. Do your due diligence. Do your work. Do your research. And maybe you just don't care, and that's up to you. But more to the point is a consideration of the Swiss Pontifical Guard, created by Pope Julius II, 1506, remains the personal army of the Vatican, and its members are soldiers of the Swiss Armed Forces. Something else to consider is that the Bank of International Settlements is housed in Basel, Switzerland. All central banks feed to it. Another item of interest there is CERN, which from it was produced the World Wide Web by Tim Berners-Lee, which the internet as we know it basically operates off of. And then lastly, tie in, of course, the economic troubles facing the United States, $30+ trillion debt, into the onslaught of the coming digital currency, implementation of digital currency. So, if all these other distractions are allowing you to be sidetracked, I ask you, I urge you, freedom is not free. The human being struggles, period. We're not all created equal. Some of us are born without limbs, without sight, without hearing. Don't seek financial gain in a reparation for how your ancestors may have struggled. Instead of pointing blame, do your best to contribute and reinforce the elements and practices of society which make a society great, healthy, and functioning. But understand and learn your history. Because again, I think you're pointing the finger at America and the precepts upon which it was founded if you're saying America owes you something in reparation for the way your ancestors may have been brought to its land. I think you're fighting the wrong battle, in other words. And that's why I've given this historical context of where the concept economically of slavery came from. And that is where I believe and consort you to focus your attention. It's been another discussion of truth. Thanks for listening. Pass it on. If you like the work that I've done, know that it's all voluntary. I work 9 to 5, probably like most of you. If you got an extra spare buck, donate it. And I suspect more importantly, buy the book. No more lies. Till next time, folks. Be awesome.